The boardroom smelled of leather and desperation. 20 executives sat frozen around the mahogany table, their faces a mixture of shock and poorly concealed satisfaction. Thornton Blackwood occupied the head chair, Declan Sterling's chair, with the casual arrogance of a man who just won a war he'd been fighting for a decade. His voice carried across the silence with practiced cruelty. Ladies and gentlemen, with 51% of outstanding shares now under my control, I'm pleased to announce that Sterling Hospitality Group is now a subsidiary of Blackwood International. As for Mr. Sterling, he turned, letting the pause hang heavy, your services are no longer required. Security will escort you out. Declan stood at the opposite end of the table, suit jacket unbuttoned, hands resting on the back of an empty chair. His face showed nothing. Years of boardroom battles had taught him that visible emotion was a weapon handed to your enemies. Inside, though, calculations ran through his mind with the speed of a man who'd built an empire from a single property and refused to watch it burn. There's one thing you forgot, Blackwood. The words came out quiet, conversational almost. Several board members leaned forward. The double doors at the far end burst open before Blackwood could respond. Harper Donovan strode in, heels clicking against marble, carrying a leather portfolio thick enough to be a weapon. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that meant business, and her eyes held the kind of certainty that came from months of investigation condensed into irrefutable proof. I'm Harper Donovan, Boston Herald. I have documented evidence that Thornton Blackwood used corporate funds to illegally purchase Sterling shares, laundered money through 12 shell companies, and bribed 3 members of this board. She dropped the portfolio on the table. Papers spilled across the polished surface. Bank statements, wire transfers, photographs, recordings transcribed and notarized. Federal prosecutors already have copies. The FBI is downstairs. Blackwood's face drained of color. Harper turned to Declan, and something passed between them in that look. Partnership forged in fire. Trust earned through impossible circumstances. Love that had started as a lie and become the most honest thing in either of their lives. And this, her voice cut through the rising murmur, is my husband, Mr. Sterling, the second largest shareholder of this company. What exactly did you plan to do about my 30%, Mr. Blackwood? The frame froze on Declan's face, surprise and pride and something deeper flickering across features he'd trained to show nothing. The $5,000 contract. The screen went black. White text appeared. To understand how they got here, we go back 6 weeks. 6 weeks earlier, Declan Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office on the 28th floor, watching cargo ships navigate Boston Harbor through the autumn haze. The office was large enough to echo when empty, decorated with the kind of understated wealth that came from building something yourself rather than inheriting it. Original art on the walls, not because he particularly cared about art, but because a decorator had insisted successful men display these things. A photograph on his desk, himself, his daughter Skylar, taken last summer on Cape Cod before everything had gotten complicated again. Behind him, 5 senior executives waited with the patience of people paid well to wait. He turned from the window, moved to the head of the conference table with the economy of motion that came from chronic shortage of time. Grayson, analysis. Grayson Webb, CFO for the past 15 years, pulled up a presentation. Charts appeared on the wall-mounted screen, all of them trending in directions that made shareholders nervous. Blackwood's cutting prices below cost in 8 key markets: Portland, Providence, Hartford, Burlington, Albany, Syracuse, Rochester, Manchester. They're taking losses intentionally. The goal is to starve us of revenue, force us to burn cash reserves, make us vulnerable. A younger executive, Marcus, brought in from McKinsey 2 years ago, leaned forward with the eagerness of someone who hadn't yet learned that most problems resisted simple solutions. We should match their pricing, show strength, protect market share. Declan's response came without hesitation. No. The room went quiet. Sterling doesn't compete on price. We compete on value. Our guests pay more because they receive more. He moved to the window again, hands in pockets, a posture that looked casual, but wasn't. Blackwood wants a race to the bottom. We're not running it. Instead, he turned back, we double down on service, increase training budgets by 40%. Every guest gets remembered by name. Every room exceeds expectation. Sterling isn't the cheapest option. We're the best. Grayson made a note on his tablet. That's a significant investment during a period when we're already seeing margin compression. Which is why Declan moved to the screen, pointed at 3 properties highlighted in red. We acquire these. Blackwood abandoned them 6 months ago when the previous owners couldn't make the numbers work. We buy them cheap, renovate properly, and prove that quality and consistency beat quarterly gaming every time. The room absorbed this. Declan had built sterling hospitality from a single property in Salem he'd purchased at 26 with money borrowed from everyone who'd ever believed in him. 22 years later, 47 hotels across the Northeast, revenue approaching $900 million annually, and a reputation that made competitors nervous. He hadn't achieved it by following conventional wisdom. Anything else? His tone suggested there shouldn't be. The executives filed out. Grayson lingered near the door, concern evident in the set of his shoulders. Boss, Blackwood's playing a longer game than pricing wars. If he's willing to lose this much money just to weaken us, I know what he's doing. Declan's voice carried an edge that made Grayson straighten. We've been fighting this war for 10 years. He thinks persistence will break me. He's wrong. After Grayson left, Declan stood alone in the office that suddenly felt too large and too quiet. His phone buzzed with the ringtone he'd assigned to family. His mother. He answered on the second ring. Mom, how are you feeling? Rosalind Sterling's voice came through thin and tired, filtered through oxygen tubes and medication that couldn't quite hide the woman who'd raised him to believe that hard work and integrity mattered more than shortcuts and wealth. Don't lie to your mother, Declan. I can hear you being busy when I need you listening. He sat on the edge of his desk, closed his eyes. I'm listening. The doctor gave me a timeline, 8 weeks, maybe less. The cancer's progressing faster than they expected. A pause filled with the sound of mechanical breathing. Before I go, I need to see something. You, happy. You, with someone. You've been alone too long because that woman broke your heart. And I won't leave this world knowing my son's going to spend the rest of his life in that empty apartment with nothing but work to keep him warm. His jaw tightened. Mom, I'm focused on the company right now. Skylar needs stability, not me bringing strange women through. Skylar needs a family. You need a partner. And her voice caught. I need to know you'll be okay when I'm gone. 8 weeks, Declan. Find someone. Fall in love. Give me this one thing. The call ended. He sat there holding the phone, staring at his reflection in the darkened screen. 48 years old. Divorced 5 years. His ex-wife had left him for one of his business associates, taking half their assets and most of his ability to trust. The company had filled the void, morning meetings and evening conference calls, weekend site visits and constant strategic planning. It had been enough. Until his mother decided to die and asked for something he didn't know how to give. That evening, he stood in his penthouse kitchen, attempting to make dinner, while Skylar sat at the island doing homework that clearly held zero interest. The apartment occupied 3 floors of a Beacon Hill building, all glass and exposed brick and custom everything. 6,000 square feet purchased during the marriage, too large now that it was usually just him. Occasionally Skylar on the weeks she stayed here instead of with her mother. He put a plate of pasta in front of his daughter. Simple marinara, nothing fancy, one of 3 dishes he could cook without burning. Skylar didn't look up from her phone. Earbuds in, volume loud enough he could hear the bass bleeding through. Take those out, we're having dinner. She pulled one earbud free with theatrical reluctance. You're never here anyway. Why does it matter if I'm listening to music? The accusation landed with practiced precision. He'd missed 3 dinners last week, canceled their planned movie night because of an emergency board meeting that hadn't actually been an emergency. Just another chess move in the endless game with Blackwood. You're right. He sat across from her, pushed his own plate aside. I've been terrible about keeping promises lately. Your grandmother, she doesn't have much time left. Skylar's expression shifted, defensive armor cracking just enough to show the scared 16-year-old underneath. Is that why you're being weird? I'm not being weird. You made dinner. You never make dinner when it's your week. Usually it's takeout and you're on a conference call. She poked at the pasta with her fork. What did Nana ask for? He considered lying, decided against it. Skylar had inherited his ability to detect bullshit. She wants to see me married again before she dies. That's dumb. You hate dating. You haven't brought anyone home since Mom left. Skylar's voice dropped on the last part, carrying weight they both felt, but rarely discussed. I don't hate dating, I'm just bad at it? She almost smiled. Remember that woman last year who kept talking about her essential oils? You look like you wanted to jump out the window. Despite everything, he laughed. The woman had been a setup from Grayson's wife, well-meaning but fundamentally incompatible with someone who lived on black coffee and quarterly earnings reports. I'm selective. You're lonely. Skylar met his eyes with the kind of directness she got from her grandmother. You work all the time because when you stop working, you remember you're alone. Mom did the same thing before she left. The observation cut deeper than she probably intended. He reached across, squeezed her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens with your mom, with the company, with anything, I'm staying. She squeezed back, then pulled away and put her earbud back in. Conversation over. But something in her posture had softened, and when she picked up her fork again, she actually ate. Later, after Skylar had retreated to her room, Declan stood in his bedroom looking at a framed photograph he kept in a drawer instead of on display. His wedding day. Vivian in white, radiant and perfect, both of them convinced they'd found something permanent. He'd worked 80-hour weeks to build the company. She'd sacrificed her career in pharmaceutical sales to play the CEO's wife. They'd both become resentful. Both started looking elsewhere for whatever was missing. Both pretended everything was fine until she'd fallen into bed with his former business partner and stopped pretending. He closed the drawer. 8 weeks to find someone he could trust, fall in love with, and convince to marry him. Might as well ask him to win the lottery while curing cancer. The narrator's voice drifted through the silence of the penthouse. Declan Sterling, 48 years old, built an empire from nothing. But success doesn't fill empty rooms, and time, despite all his money and power, was running out. Across the city, in a studio apartment in Cambridge, barely large enough to qualify as a one-bedroom, Harper Donovan sat surrounded by the organized chaos of an investigation 6 months in the making. 3 laptops ran simultaneously, each screen displaying different layers of corporate malfeasance. Financial records spread across her dining table, which was also her desk, also her workspace, also the place she ate standing up because chairs took up room she didn't have. She typed notes into her primary system, cross-referencing wire transfers against public bidding records. Lancaster Bennett, her uncle, had transferred $2.3 million from his company's development fund to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands on March 15th. That same day, the city council had voted to award a major downtown construction contract to Bennett Properties, despite 3 lower bids from competitors. Got you, she whispered to the screen. Harper had been chasing this story since winter, back when a whistleblower had sent her an encrypted email suggesting that Bennett Properties was dirty at levels that went beyond standard corner cutting. The whistleblower had since disappeared, not dramatically, just stopped responding. Probably got scared or paid off, but they'd given her enough to start pulling threads. And Harper Donovan, Pulitzer winner at 29, specialist in corporate corruption, Did not let go of threads once she started pulling. Her phone buzzed. Steve, her editor at the Boston Herald. She answered on speaker while typing. I'm still working on it. How much longer? We've got space held for 2 weeks from now, but if you're not ready, I need to nail down 3 more sources. If I publish what I have now and one detail's wrong, Bennett's lawyers will bury the paper in litigation. She paused typing, focused on the call. This is big, Steve. City council corruption, bid rigging, possible money laundering, but it has to be airtight. Just don't take so long that someone else breaks it first. He hung up. She returned to the documents, lost herself in the rhythm of investigation, the patient accumulation of evidence, the satisfaction of watching a case build brick by brick. This was what she was good at. This was what mattered. Not the Pulitzer, though that had been nice, but the actual work of exposing people who thought wealth and power made them untouchable. Her other phone rang, the one she kept for family, which mostly meant her grandmother since everyone else had fallen away years ago. She grabbed it without looking at the screen. Nana B, I'm planning to visit this weekend. Don't make promises you're too busy to keep. Beatrice Donovan's voice carried the particular sharpness of someone who'd taught high school English for 40 years and could spot evasion at 50 paces. I didn't call for visits. I called because the doctor scheduled my surgery. Next week, Tuesday. Harper stopped typing. That's fast. Last we talked, they said it would be a month before they could get you in. They had a cancellation, and given the state of my heart, the surgeon thought sooner was better than waiting. A pause filled with the beeping of hospital monitors. There's risk, honey. I'm 78. The heart valve replacement could go sideways. I could not wake up. Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine. You're the toughest person I know. Which is why I can be honest about mortality. Beatrice's tone softened slightly. If something goes wrong, I need to know you're not going to be alone. Your mother chose her new family over you 20 years ago. Your father's been gone since you were 12. I raised you, and I love you, and I will not leave this world until I see you settled with someone who deserves you. Harper felt her throat tighten. Nana, I'm focused on my career. The investigation I'm working on could win you another award, could get you another byline, could do everything except keep you warm at night or hold you when you're scared. Beatrice's voice cracked slightly. That man who broke your engagement, Archer, whatever his name was, he did damage I watched you bury under work. 2 years, Harper. 2 years of you throwing yourself into stories so you don't have to think about being hurt. I want better for you. I'll try. I promise You have 1 week. 1 week before I go under anesthesia. Show me you're not going to spend the rest of your life alone with your laptop. The call ended before Harper could respond. She sat there staring at her screens, at the evidence she'd compiled against her uncle, at the career she'd built on the foundation of trust destroyed. Archer Cole had been her college sweetheart, law school graduate, ambitious and smart, and completely willing to lie about a relationship with his senior partner's daughter while engaged to Harper. She'd found out 3 weeks before their wedding, called it off, and spent the subsequent months learning that heartbreak was easier to handle when you buried it under 60-hour work weeks. Her email pinged. Monthly bills summary from the hospital. $45,000 outstanding for Beatrice's treatments. Insurance covering less than half. Payment plans maxed out. Collections notices starting to arrive. Harper's savings account held $8,200. Her checking had $600. Her freelance journalism career paid enough to cover rent and ramen, but not medical emergencies. She pulled up her bank app just to confirm the numbers hadn't magically improved. They hadn't. The math was simple and brutal. She needed money, fast, and there was no ethical way to get it in time. Her laptop screen flickered. Email notification. Subject line, freelance opportunity, $50,000. She almost deleted it as spam before the sender address registered. An editor she'd worked with at a magazine 3 years ago. Legitimate contact. She opened it. Harper, I have a private client who needs investigative work on a corporate competitor. 6 weeks, comprehensive deep dive, pays $50,000 on completion. Interested? Call me. $50,000. Exactly enough to clear the medical bills and keep her grandmother from going into debt over trying to stay alive. She reached for her phone, then stopped, took a breath. Something felt off about the timing, too convenient, too perfect. But desperation had a way of making you ignore your instincts. Before she could second-guess herself, her personal cell rang. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Miss Donovan, this is Massachusetts General Billing Department. We're calling about your grandmother, Beatrice Donovan's outstanding balance. We need to discuss payment arrangements before her scheduled surgery, or we may need to postpone. She hung up, stared at the ceiling of her tiny apartment, felt the walls pressing in. 1 week to find someone, fall in love, get married, and make her dying grandmother happy. Or $50,000 to clear bills and buy time to figure out the rest. The universe, apparently, had a sense of humor. The next morning, Harper walked into Thinking Cup Cafe in downtown Boston with her mind cycling through impossible calculations. The cafe was busy with the pre-work crowd, lawyers grabbing espresso, finance people checking phones, the ambient noise of a city that never stopped moving. She stood in line, ordered her usual $7 latte that represented a luxury she couldn't afford but refused to give up, and turned toward the door while simultaneously checking her email. She wasn't watching where she was going. Neither was the man coming in. They collided hard enough that her coffee went airborne. Training from years of clutching electronics kicked in. She twisted to protect her phone, which meant the coffee hit the floor instead of either of them. The cup exploded in a spray of foam and ceramic. God, I'm so sorry. She looked up. The man was maybe 6'1", late 40s, wearing a suit that managed to look expensive and understated simultaneously. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of thing you got from a tailor who didn't advertise. His hair had gone silver at the temples, dark everywhere else, and his eyes were a shade of blue-gray that suggested either very good genetics or very expensive contacts. He had the posture of someone used to being listened to, the kind of casual authority that came from running things. My fault entirely. His voice was measured, controlled, the kind that stayed calm during emergencies. You're not hurt? No, just... She laughed despite herself. Just having possibly the worst week of my life, and apparently the universe decided I needed to add assault via caffeine to the list. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite amusement, more like recognition of a fellow member of the Bad Week Club. I understand the feeling. They stood there for a beat longer than strangers usually did. Some unspoken acknowledgement passing between people who were both drowning in different ways. Harper heard herself say, "You know what's really insane? I need to find a husband by next Tuesday." She said it like a joke, like absurdist humor, like the kind of thing you throw out to strangers you'll never see again, just to make the mundane collision into a story. But his eyes sharpened, and she realized he'd heard it differently. Next Tuesday, he repeated it carefully, as if testing the words. That's specific. My grandmother's having heart surgery, major valve replacement, high risk. She's 78 and terrified she won't survive it, and her dying wish is to see me married before she goes under. The words tumbled out faster than she intended, which is completely unreasonable and also completely understandable, and I can't say no to her because she raised me after my parents fell apart, and I literally don't know where to find a husband in 1 week unless there's some kind of emergency husband store I'm unaware of. He didn't laugh, didn't offer platitudes, just looked at her with an intensity that suggested he was actually processing what she'd said instead of dismissing it as crazy person rambling. If I said I might be able to help with that, would you think I was insane? Harper blinked. I'm sorry, what? I have a similar problem, different circumstances, same basic need. A partner temporarily for family reasons. He pulled out his wallet, handed her a business card. My name's Declan Sterling. I run a hospitality company here in Boston, and I'm about to make you an offer that's either going to sound like the solution to both our problems or the beginning of a true crime podcast. She looked at the card. Sterling Hospitality Group, CEO. The company name rang a vague bell. She'd seen their hotels around New England, boutique properties that positioned themselves somewhere between Marriott and Four Seasons. Are you seriously suggesting a contractual arrangement, short-term marriage of convenience? You need a husband to satisfy your grandmother before her surgery. I need a wife to satisfy my mother before she dies of cancer. 8 weeks maximum, clean dissolution after, financially compensated for your time and inconvenience. He said it like a business proposal, calm and rational, as if people negotiated marriages in coffee shops every day. Harper should have walked away, should have laughed, made a joke, gotten her coffee replaced, and left. Instead, she found herself saying, "How much compensation are we talking about? How much do you need?" The question landed differently than she expected. Not judgmental, not calculating, just straightforward inquiry from someone who understood that money solves certain problems, even if it couldn't solve others. 50,000, she said it before she could stop herself. My grandmother has medical bills. I can't let her go into collections over trying to stay alive. Declan didn't blink at the number. I'll give you 5,000 up front when we sign the contract. The remaining 45,000 when the 8 weeks are complete and we file for divorce. You're serious? Completely. He gestured toward an empty table near the window. Can we sit? This isn't a conversation for standing in front of a coffee counter. She should have said no. Every instinct cultivated through years of investigative journalism screamed that something about this was wrong, or at minimum, incredibly weird. But the part of her that had sat in a hospital room yesterday, watching her grandmother struggle to breathe, the part that had stared at collection notices and impossible math, that part pulled out a chair and sat down. Declan sat across from her with the economical movements of someone who never wasted energy. I'll be direct because that's faster than dancing around it. My mother is dying. She has maybe 8 weeks. Her final wish is to see me married and settled because my divorce 5 years ago convinced her I'm going to spend the rest of my life alone and miserable. She's not entirely wrong, but that's beside the point. So you want to hire someone to fake marry you to make your dying mother happy? Harper kept her voice flat, professional. That's either very sweet or very disturbing, and I haven't decided which. Both, probably, he almost smiled. Here's what I'm offering. A legal marriage, properly filed, completely above board in terms of paperwork. We live together for 8 weeks to maintain the appearance of legitimacy. You meet my mother and my daughter. She's 16, she'll be skeptical. And you convincingly play the role of someone who fell in love with me quickly enough that we decided not to wait. Your daughter, Harper latched onto that detail. You're asking me to lie to a teenager. I'm asking you to help her see that her father isn't going to spend the rest of his life emotionally shut down because her mother destroyed his ability to trust. His jaw tightened fractionally. Skylar needs to believe love is possible after betrayal. And yes, I recognize the irony of teaching that lesson through a contractual arrangement. Harper studied him. The careful control, the way he held tension in his shoulders despite the calm voice, the flicker of something raw when he mentioned his daughter. What happened with your ex-wife? She left me for one of my business associates, took half the assets, most of my dignity, and all of my willingness to make myself vulnerable to someone again. He met Harper's eyes. Which is why this arrangement appeals to me. Clear terms, defined duration, no risk of actual emotional damage when it ends. You're describing a business transaction. Yes. And you're offering me $50,000 to participate. Yes. Harper leaned back. What's the catch? What aren't you telling me? Declan's expression shifted slightly. Respect for the question, maybe. 3 things. First, my company is currently under attack from a competitor. If news of a fake marriage leaked, it would be used as evidence that I'm unstable, manipulative, whatever narrative serves their purposes. So absolute discretion is required. Second, my mother is very intelligent and very good at detecting lies. You'll need to be convincing. And third, he paused, I need someone I can trust not to exploit this situation. The wrong person could blackmail me, sabotage me, cause problems I can't afford, which is why I'm taking a substantial risk offering this to someone I met 30 seconds ago. So why are you? Offering it to me, I mean. Because when you said you needed a husband by Tuesday, you look like someone telling the truth about an impossible situation. And because something in my gut says you're not the kind of person who would destroy someone for money. He tilted his head slightly. Am I wrong? Harper thought about the investigation into her uncle, about building a case that would destroy his company and probably send him to prison. Thought about the collection calls from the hospital, about her grandmother's labored breathing, about Archer's betrayal, and the careful walls she'd built around anything resembling trust. I'm an investigative journalist, she said slowly. My entire career is built on finding the truth and exposing it. You're asking me to live a lie. I'm asking you to prioritize one truth, that you love your grandmother and want her to have peace before a dangerous surgery, over another truth, which is that sometimes people make unconventional arrangements for valid reasons. He pulled out his phone, opened his calendar. I have a lawyer who can draft a contract by tomorrow. Non-disclosure agreement, payment terms, clear expectations on both sides, dissolution timeline. Everything documented. If you agree we can be married by Friday, give our families the weekend to process, and you'll have time with your grandmother before her surgery. This is insane. Completely. And you're serious, completely serious. I don't make jokes about legal contracts or dying family members. His expression was steady, certain. I need this to work, which means I need someone smart enough to navigate the complexity and desperate enough to take the risk. You appear to be both. Harper felt her phone buzz in her pocket. Probably another bill, another reminder that rent was due and the car needed new tires, and her grandmother's surgery carried a 5-figure deductible, even with insurance. She thought about what it would mean to say yes, lying to Nana B, marrying a stranger, living in some kind of bizarre pretense for 2 months. Then she thought about what it would mean to say no, scrambling for money that didn't exist, watching her grandmother face surgery alone and worried, the collection agencies circling like sharks. I need to think about it. Declan pulled a card from his wallet, wrote something on the back. My personal cell. Call me by tomorrow morning if you decide yes. After that, the timeline gets too tight. He stood, then paused. Harper. It is Harper, right? She nodded. This works only if we're honest with each other about everything except the core lie. If you agree, I need to know I can trust you with information about my family, my company, my life. And you need the same from me. Can you do that? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither of them fully understood yet. Harper thought about trust, how Archer had shattered it, how her uncle had betrayed family for money, how the world had taught her that people always had angles, and nothing was ever as simple as it appeared. But Declan's eyes held something that looked almost like vulnerability beneath the careful control. And when she reached out to take the card, his hand was steady, but his grip was just slightly too tight, like someone holding on to the last chance they had at something impossible. I'll call you tomorrow. He left without another word. Harper sat there holding the business card, turning it over to see his handwritten number on the back, the elegant script of someone who'd learned penmanship before computers made it obsolete. Her coffee had long since soaked into the floorboards. The barista was cleaning it up with the weary efficiency of someone who'd seen stranger things during morning rush. Harper stood, walked out into the October sunlight, and pulled out her phone. She had 20 hours to decide if she was brave enough, or desperate enough, or crazy enough to marry a stranger. The narrator's voice. Sometimes the universe doesn't answer your prayers. Sometimes it offers you something stranger, a contract instead of a covenant, convenience instead of love, and the kind of risk that either saves you or destroys you. Harper Donovan was about to find out which. Harper spent that night in her apartment running background checks the way other people stress-baked. 3 different databases, cross-referenced with public records, social media archaeology going back a decade. By 2 in the morning, she had a profile of Declan Sterling that would have impressed a private investigator. Sterling Hospitality Group, founded 22 years ago with a single property in Salem, purchased through leveraged financing that would have destroyed most people if it failed. Instead, he turned it profitable within 18 months, used the equity to acquire a second property, then a third. The expansion pattern showed patience, no reckless growth, just steady accumulation of well-managed assets in secondary markets where larger chains overlooked opportunities. Current portfolio, 47 hotels, revenue projections for the year approaching $900 million, privately held with Declan controlling 78% of shares. His divorce from Vivian Sterling 5 years ago had been covered in Boston business press because she'd taken half his personal wealth in the settlement, not half the company, which had been protected by prenup, but half of everything else. The articles danced around the reasons, using phrases like irreconcilable differences and amicable separation that Harper's bullshit detector immediately flagged as lies. You didn't lose half your assets in an amicable split. She found Vivian's current social media presence easily enough. The woman photographed well, blonde, polished, the kind of beauty that came from excellent genetics and better maintenance. Recent posts showed her at charity galas, always on the arm of the same man. Harper zoomed in on one photo, ran his face through reverse image search. Thornton Blackwood, CEO, Blackwood International, direct competitor to Sterling Hospitality. Harper sat back processing. Declan's ex-wife was dating his business rival. That wasn't just messy, that was strategic warfare dressed up as romance. She dug deeper, found a 10-year history of Sterling and Blackwood bidding against each other for properties, undercutting each other in markets, filing complaints with regulatory bodies over zoning and licensing. The competition had escalated from professional to personal somewhere around the time of Declan's divorce, which suggested the relationship between Vivian and Thornton hadn't started after the marriage ended. Her phone buzzed with the email she'd received earlier that evening. She opened it again, stared at the attachment about the Dallas consortium deal. Someone with access to Declan's confidential files had sent this to her specifically, hours after the wedding. The timing couldn't be coincidental. By 3 in the morning, Harper had a headache and a decision. She picked up her phone, stared at Declan's number, thought about all the ways this could go catastrophically wrong. Then she thought about Nana B in that hospital bed, about the surgery scheduled for next Tuesday, about the look in her grandmother's eyes when she'd said she didn't want to die knowing Harper would be alone. She sent the text, "I'm in. When do we sign?" The response came back in under a minute, despite the hour. "My lawyer's office, 10 a.m. I'll send you the address." Harper set her phone down and stared at her ceiling, wondering if desperation had just made her brave or stupid. Probably both. The law office occupied the 23rd floor of a building in the financial district, all glass and steel, and the kind of aggressive professionalism that charged by the quarter hour. Declan was already there when Harper arrived, sitting across from a woman in her 50s who radiated competence the way some people radiated perfume. "Ms. Donovan," the lawyer stood, extended a hand. "Patricia Rodriguez. I've drawn up the contract per Mr. Sterling's specifications. Please, sit. This will take some time to review properly." The document was 12 pages of dense legal language, covering everything from living arrangements to social media restrictions to what happened if either party violated confidentiality. Harper read every word twice, while Declan sat quietly, occasionally checking his phone, but mostly just waiting with the patience of someone who'd sat through countless contract negotiations. When she reached the compensation clause, she paused. This says $5,000 on signing, $45,000 on dissolution, but it also has a penalty clause. If I breach confidentiality, I owe you $500,000? Patricia answered before Declan could. Standard protection for arrangements of this nature. Mr. Sterling's business interests require that certain information remain private. If you were to, for instance, sell details of this marriage to media outlets, the financial penalty ensures compliance. And if he breaches the contract? Same penalty applies to him. Patricia slid another page across. Everything here is reciprocal. You're both bound by the same terms. Harper looked at Declan. You're really willing to risk $500,000 on me keeping quiet? I'm willing to risk it on my read of your character being accurate. His expression was steady. Are you willing to risk the same on me? She thought about the investigation she'd done overnight, about the man who'd built a company through careful strategy rather than aggressive expansion, who'd taken a devastating divorce and used it as motivation to grow rather than collapse. About the way he'd talked about his daughter yesterday, the tightness in his voice when he mentioned betrayal. I want one change. She pointed to a clause about living arrangements. This says I have to follow reasonable directives from you regarding social appearances. I'm not comfortable with language that vague. I want it specified that we make decisions jointly, not that you give orders and I follow them. Declan glanced at Patricia, who made a note on her tablet. Easily amended. The language can read, both parties will mutually agree on public appearances and social obligations. Acceptable? Harper nodded. They spent another 20 minutes negotiating smaller points. Harper wanted the right to end the arrangement early if either party became abusive. Declan wanted protection against her using information gained during the marriage for journalistic purposes. They both agreed that medical emergencies voided certain obligations. By the time Patricia printed final copies, the contract had grown to 15 pages. Harper signed her name on the designated line, watched Declan do the same, accepted the envelope Patricia handed her containing $2,500 bills with the surreal calm of someone who'd stepped outside normal reality. We'll file the marriage license this afternoon. Patricia collected the documents. I've arranged for a civil ceremony at City Hall tomorrow at 2 p.m. You'll each need one witness. After that, you're legally married. Walking out of the building, Harper felt the weight of the envelope in her purse like it was radioactive. Declan walked beside her to the elevator, pressed the button for the ground floor. Second thoughts? She shook her head. Just processing that I'm about to marry someone whose favorite color I don't know. Green, specific shade of green you get on the ocean right before a storm. He glanced at her. You? Blue, dark blue, almost black. The color the sky gets right after sunset, but before full dark. She smiled slightly. This is possibly the weirdest getting to know you conversation I've ever had. We can make it weirder if you want. Favorite food, biggest fear, whether you believe in anything beyond the material world. The elevator arrived. They stepped in. Or we can stick to logistics and keep it simple. Logistics feels safer. Safer isn't the same as better. He pressed the button for the lobby. But we have 8 weeks. Plenty of time to figure out which one we actually need. The next day, Harper stood in Boston City Hall, wearing a dress she'd bought that morning from Nordstrom Rack. Navy blue, simple lines, the kind of thing that could work for a wedding or a business meeting, depending on context. Riley had arrived looking confused and concerned, carrying the bouquet Harper had asked her to grab from the corner florist. You're absolutely sure about this? Riley kept her voice low while they waited in the corridor outside the ceremony room. Because I love you, but this is objectively insane. It's a temporary arrangement for valid reasons that helps both of us. Harper had practiced that sentence. It sounded almost reasonable when she said it quickly. You're marrying a billionaire you met 48 hours ago because your grandmother wants you settled before heart surgery. Riley's skepticism was profound. In what universe is that not a rom-com plot? In the universe where I'm being paid $50,000 and we both know exactly what this is. Harper adjusted the neckline of her dress. It's honest, in its way, more honest than half the marriages people stumble into, thinking they're in love when they're really just terrified of being alone. Riley studied her. When did you get this cynical? When Archer proved that the things people promise and the things they do are entirely separate categories. Harper checked her phone. 1 minute until they were scheduled. Is Nana B going to be upset I didn't invite her? She's going to be thrilled you're married and too happy to ask questions. Riley squeezed her hand. Just promise me you know what you're doing. I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. Harper squeezed back, but I'm doing it anyway. Declan arrived with Grayson Webb, who looked at Harper with the appraising expression of a CFO calculating risk-to-reward ratios. The four of them filed into the small ceremony room, where a clerk waited with the bored efficiency of someone who performed these services 20 times a week. The ceremony itself took less than 10 minutes. The clerk read the required legal language about marriage being a solemn commitment, asked if they understood they were entering into a binding contract recognized by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, required verbal confirmation that they were doing this of their own free will and without coercion. When he got to the vows, Harper felt her heart rate spike. She'd been treating this like a business transaction, had convinced herself it was just paperwork, but standing here in front of witnesses, about to promise things she didn't mean, created a cognitive dissonance she wasn't prepared for. Do you, Declan Alexander Sterling, take Harper Elizabeth Donovan as your lawfully wedded wife? Declan's voice came steady and clear. I do, and I promise to be honest about what matters, even when the truth is complicated. The clerk blinked, clearly not used to people improvising during civil ceremonies. Harper felt something shift in her chest. He just made a promise that acknowledged the fundamental lie while committing to something true underneath it. Do you, Harper Elizabeth Donovan, take Declan Alexander Sterling as your lawfully wedded husband? Her voice came out quieter than intended. I do, and I promise to see you as you are, not who others think you should be. The words surprised her as she said them. She'd meant them as reciprocity, matching his honesty with her own, but they landed with unexpected weight. The clerk recovered his rhythm. By the power vested in me by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. They looked at each other. This hadn't been covered in the contract. Declan raised an eyebrow slightly. Question, not assumption. Harper nodded once. The kiss lasted 3 seconds. Lips touching, nothing more. The kind of chaste contact that satisfied legal expectations, without pretending to passion they didn't feel. But something about the gentleness of it, the way he pulled back and met her eyes with what looked almost like gratitude, made it feel more intimate than it should have. Riley and Grayson applauded dutifully. The clerk handed them the signed marriage certificate. They filed out into the October afternoon, legally bound, functionally strangers, both pretending this made any kind of sense. The first week passed in a blur of adjustment. Harper moved her belongings into the Beacon Hill penthouse in 2 trips, everything she owned fitting into boxes that looked absurdly small against 6,000 square feet of custom everything. Declan gave her the guest bedroom at the far end of the apartment. Private bathroom, walk-in closet larger than her old studio, windows overlooking the Charles River. She unpacked slowly, trying to make the space feel less like a hotel and more like somewhere she could actually breathe. The espresso machine in the kitchen intimidated her, so she made instant coffee instead. Declan left for work before she woke most mornings, came home after she'd retreated to her room most nights. They were married but living like polite strangers sharing an expensive Airbnb. On the 4th day, she found a note on the kitchen counter. Meeting in Portland. Back tonight. Library is yours if you need workspace. D. Harper took him up on the offer, spreading her Lancaster investigation files across the mahogany desk in his library. She worked there most of the day, comfortable in a way she hadn't been since moving in. When Declan came home that evening looking exhausted, He found her still there, surrounded by documents and notebooks. "You're using the space." He stood in the doorway, tie loosened, expression unreadable. "You said I could. Is this okay? I can move if—" "It's your home now, too." He came into the room, picked up the photograph she'd set on the desk. "Your grandmother?" After her retirement, she taught high school English for 40 years. Harper took the frame back, set it carefully. "I called to check on her today. Pre-op appointments went well. Surgery's still scheduled for Tuesday." "That's good." Something in his voice suggested he meant it. "You're close to her." "She raised me after my parents fell apart. She's the only family I have left." Harper closed her laptop. "Your meeting didn't go well." It wasn't a question. Declan's shoulders carried tension like a physical weight. "Blackwood's undercutting us on 3 properties simultaneously, burning money just to block our expansion." He moved to the window. "It's not about profit for him anymore. It's personal. Because of the Portland waterfront deal 8 years ago." He turned, surprised. "You researched that far back?" "I'm thorough." Harper stood. "You outbid him for a major property. He declared war. Then your marriage fell apart 2 months later. The timeline's suggestive, isn't it?" His voice was flat. "Vivian claims she and Thornton got together after the divorce. I think she was feeding him intelligence during our marriage. Every dinner conversation about my plans, every casual mention of properties I wanted, all of it weaponized. That's why you prefer contracts to promises. Clear terms. No room for one person to decide the rules change without telling the other." He met her eyes. "You understand that. Your ex-fiancé taught you the same lesson." Harper thought about Archer, about the emails she'd read on his laptop, about learning that betrayal often came from the people you trusted most. "We're both here because we stopped believing in anything that couldn't be written down and notarized. And yet we're about to lie to our families about being in love." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "Tomorrow night, dinner with my mother and Skylar. We need to synchronize our story." They spent the next hour at the kitchen island, building their cover like architects drafting blueprints. Met at a coffee shop, true. Immediate connection, debatable but not completely false. Dated intensely for 2 weeks before deciding they were certain. Fiction, but plausible. Moved in together because Harper's lease was ending and Declan had space. Technically accurate if you removed all context. "My mother will ask what you love about me." Harper considered the question seriously. "I'll tell her you're direct, that you don't play games or hide behind politeness when honesty would be more useful. That you make me feel like an equal partner rather than someone to be managed." He looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "That's actually true." "Makes it easier to sell." She stood. "What will you say about me?" "That you ask hard questions, that you're not intimidated by wealth or status, that you see people clearly, including their flaws, and still choose compassion over judgment." He held her gaze. Also true, based on limited data. Something in Harper's chest tightened. These were supposed to be lies for his mother's benefit, but they landed with the weight of genuine observation. The next evening, they drove to Brookline in Declan's Mercedes. Rosalind's house was modest compared to the penthouse. 2 stories, garden carefully maintained, the kind of home where families grew rather than fortunes accumulated. Inside, Rosalind sat in a recliner, oxygen tank humming beside her. She was smaller than Harper expected, cancer having reduced her to essentials. But her eyes were sharp as she assessed the woman her son had supposedly married. Skylar occupied the couch, earbuds in, radiating calculated disinterest. "So this is Harper." Rosalind's voice was weak but firm. "Come here, let me look at you properly." Harper crossed to her, let the older woman take her hands. The grip was surprisingly strong. "What do you do?" "Investigative journalist. Freelance, mostly corporate corruption cases." The truth felt safer than invention. "I've spent the last 6 months building a story about bid rigging in city development." "A journalist?" Rosalind's eyes flicked to Declan. Someone whose job is finding truth. Interesting choice for someone who values privacy. Mom, I'm not criticizing, observing. She turned back to Harper. What do you love about my son? The question hung there, impossible to answer without revealing too much or lying too obviously. Harper thought about their conversation the night before, about the things that had felt unexpectedly true. He doesn't make me feel like I need to be anything other than what I am. Most people, when they find out I investigate corporate fraud, they either get defensive or try to prove they're ethical. Declan just listened and asked intelligent questions. She met Rosalind's gaze. He sees the difficult parts of me and doesn't ask me to soften them. Satisfaction flickered across Rosalind's face. Good answer. Honest one, I think. She released Harper's hands. Help in the kitchen. I want to talk to my son alone. In the kitchen, Harper arranged plates, while trying not to think about what Rosalind might be saying. The domestic normalcy felt surreal. Playing housewife in someone else's family, performing intimacy she didn't feel, all to give a dying woman peace. Skylar appeared in the doorway, earbuds out, expression hostile. You married my dad for his money. Harper nearly dropped the plate. Excuse me? Don't pretend you don't know what I mean. Dad's rich. You showed up out of nowhere. Suddenly you're married. It's obvious. Skylar's voice carried teenage cruelty sharpened by hurt. My mom did the same thing. Pretended to love him until someone richer came along. Harper set down the plate carefully, crouched to eye level. I'm not your mother. Everyone says that, then they leave. Skylar's armor cracked slightly, showing the scared 16-year-old underneath. I'm not asking you to trust me immediately. Harper's voice was steady. Watch what I do. Judge me on actions, not words. If I leave, you were right. If I stay, maybe reconsider your assumptions. They stared at each other. Finally, Skylar nodded once and retreated. Dinner was careful navigation through conversational minefields. Rosalind asked questions designed to catch inconsistencies, morning routines, sleeping arrangements, whether Declan still burned everything he cooked. Harper and Declan fielded each one with their practiced answers, close enough to truth that the lies felt sustainable. Driving back, Declan's hands were tight on the steering wheel. Skylar confronted you. Accused me of being a gold digger like Vivian. Harper watched city lights slide past. I told her actions matter more than words. What did she say? Nothing, but she listened. Harper glanced at him. Your mother knows something's off. She always does, but she wants to believe it's real. He pulled into their building's garage. That gives us room to convince her. 6 days after the wedding, Grayson Webb appeared at the penthouse at 7 in the morning, face grim. Declan was mid-coffee when his CFO arrived unannounced. Harper emerged from her bedroom, drawn by tense voices. We have a problem. Grayson set his laptop on the island, pulled up security logs. Someone's been accessing confidential files from your office. Server records show repeated, unauthorized access over 3 months. Harper watched Declan's expression darken as he read the data. How? Cassidy Brennan, your executive assistant. Grayson pulled up personnel files. I ran a deeper background check after noticing irregularities in her expense reports. Her identity's fabricated. The references we called? Shell numbers. College transcripts? Forged. She doesn't exist before 18 months ago. Declan's face went very still. Who's paying her? Still tracing the funds. But boss, she's had access to everything. Client lists, acquisition targets, financial projections, the Dallas consortium deal. Grayson glanced at Harper. Anything you've discussed in your office or at home, assume it's been compromised. After Grayson left, Declan stood staring at nothing. Harper spoke quietly. You trusted her. I trusted her credentials. His voice was cold. Apparently, I need to stop trusting anything. He grabbed his keys. I have to deal with this. There's a charity gala tonight at Boston Harbor Hotel. Can you be ready by 7? What gala? Annual fundraiser, Sterling's flagship property. His jaw was tight. Major donors, board members, business community. Blackwood will be there. We need to look united. That evening, Harper wore the midnight blue dress Declan had insisted on buying despite her protests. Valentino cost more than she used to make in a month. She felt like an imposter playing dress-up. The ballroom glittered with calculated excess. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, champagne flowing freely. Boston's elite pretending charity justified extravagance. Declan navigated the crowd with practiced ease, introducing Harper to board members and investors. She smiled until her face hurt, fielded questions about their whirlwind romance, lied about how they'd known immediately they were meant for each other. Then Vivian Sterling arrived. The woman was even more striking in person. Blonde hair styled in effortless waves, skin maintained through procedures Harper couldn't begin to afford, wearing red like a declaration of war. The man beside her radiated entitled wealth. Thornton Blackwood, silver hair, perfect tailoring, smile that never reached his eyes. They spotted Declan and Harper simultaneously. Vivian whispered something to Thornton that made him smile unpleasantly. Declan's hand found Harper's lower back. Stay close. Thornton approached with Vivian on his arm, moving through the crowd like sharks. Sterling, surprised to see you here. Thought you'd be managing your company's declining market share. Declan's expression remained pleasant. Blackwood, still compensating for mediocrity with predatory pricing? I prefer to call it competitive strategy. Thornton's eyes slid to Harper with assessment that felt invasive. And this must be the new Mrs. Sterling. How long have you two known each other? The question was designed to expose them. Harper answered before Declan could. Long enough to know he's everything his reputation suggests. Principled, strategic, and absolutely terrifying to people who mistake aggression for strength. Vivian's smile sharpened. Diplomatic, though I wonder if you've discovered his less appealing qualities yet. The workaholism, the emotional unavailability, the tendency to choose business over everything else. I wonder the same about you. Harper kept her voice conversational. Whether you've realized Thornton's using you for access to Declan's vulnerabilities, or if you already knew that when you started sleeping with him before your divorce was final. The words landed like grenades. Vivian's face went rigid. Thornton's smile vanished. Nearby conversations faltered as people registered the confrontation. Declan's hand tightened on Harper's back. Surprise and something that might have been pride. Enjoy your evening. He guided Harper away before either could respond. Once they reached privacy near the service corridor, he turned to her. That was either brilliant or catastrophically reckless. She attacked you through me. I wasn't going to stand there and take it. Harper felt adrenaline still pumping. Besides, we can't afford to look weak. No, we can't. His expression was unreadable. But now they know you're not easily manipulated. By the time they left, Harper's face hurt from forced smiling. In the car, Declan started the engine but didn't drive immediately. Thank you for defending me back there. Contract specifies maintaining appearances. Harper looked at him across the console. But you're welcome anyway. It wasn't just appearances. His voice was quiet. When you told Vivian I was worth defending, I almost believed you meant it. The admission hung between them, vulnerable in a way their contract had never accounted for. Maybe I did mean it. She buckled her seatbelt to have something to do with her hands. You're not perfect, but you're not who she painted you as either. He pulled out of the garage without responding, but something in his shoulders had relaxed. The next morning, Harper sat in the library staring at the email she'd received the night of their wedding. The anonymous sender, the Dallas Consortium documents, the obvious attempt to create suspicion. She'd been trying to ignore it, but after discovering Cassidy's betrayal, the leak made sickening sense. She made a decision that violated the spirit of their contract. She went to Declan's home office. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be in his own home? Inside, files organized by year and topic, framed photos of Skylar, a desk with multiple monitors. She started with file cabinets, found folders for board meetings, acquisitions, audits. In the bottom desk drawer, she discovered a folder labeled Blackwood Counterintelligence. Inside, photographs of Thornton Blackwood, bank records, wire transfers, corporate documents covered in highlighter, and handwritten notes. Declan had been investigating Blackwood for months. The evidence suggested money laundering, illegal stock purchases, bribery of board members. She photographed several pages with her phone, then continued searching. Found another folder, Property Disposal Analysis. Detailed evaluations of 15 properties, the same ones mentioned in the anonymous email. Strategic repositioning, not financial distress. Recommendations on which to sell and why. So the leak had been real. But why send it to her? The front door opened. Declan's voice. "Harper? I'm home early. Dinner got canceled." Panic spiked. She shoved folders back, closed drawers, slipped into the hallway just as Declan appeared from the other direction. His eyes went to his office door, slightly ajar, then to her face. "Looking for something?" The question was neutral, but his body language had shifted. Shoulders tense, jaw tight. Harper made a choice. "I need to tell you something. The night we got married, I received an anonymous email. Confidential sterling documents about the Dallas Consortium deal. I've been trying to figure out who sent it and why." Declan's expression went very still. "You're telling me this now because you just went through my office looking for answers. I'm telling you because whoever leaked those documents knew about our marriage. They're trying to create suspicion between us." She met his eyes. "We've been compromised from the start." He absorbed that. "Show me the email." She pulled it up on her phone, watched him read, his face darkening as he examined the metadata. "This came from our internal server." He enlarged the attachment. "Someone copied confidential files and sent them to you specifically. Hours after we got married." "Cassidy. Has to be." He handed back her phone. "She's been feeding someone information. Probably Blackwood. Maybe Vivian." "Declan," Harper caught his arm before he could pull away. "I'm sorry for going through your office. I should have told you about the email immediately." "You should have, but I understand why you didn't." He pulled free gently. "Trust is complicated when the foundation is a contract instead of a relationship." He called Grayson, spoke in technical language about server audits and leak investigations. Harper sat in the library trying to parse whether she felt relieved or more worried that her instincts had been correct. When Declan returned, he looked exhausted. "Grayson's running a full audit. We'll know exactly what Cassidy accessed and when. And then we figure out the endgame." He sat across from her. "Harper, I need to know, despite everything, can I trust you?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications far beyond their contract. Harper thought about the Blackwood evidence she'd photographed, about the care he'd taken documenting crimes. "You're building a case against him, actually trying to get him arrested." "I'm documenting criminal behavior. When I have enough, I'll turn it over to prosecutors." His eyes were steady. "Blackwood uses corruption as a business tool. I prefer law and evidence. And if bringing him down destroys Vivian too?" She made her choices. His voice was flat. "I won't hesitate to let her face the consequences." Harper understood that calculation. "I won't use anything I learned in your office. Won't leak information about the Dallas deal. And I won't let whoever's targeting us succeed in making me doubt you. Even though I kept business secrets that could affect your reputation." "Even though," she stood. "But from now on, if something impacts both of us, I need to know before I find out from anonymous emails. I can't fight battles I don't see coming." He stood too, moved close enough that she could see silver threading through his dark hair, stress lines around his eyes that suggested too many years of fighting alone. "Agreed. Same applies to you. If your investigation into your uncle creates problems that spill over, I need advance warning." They shook hands like business partners sealing an amendment to their contract. But when their fingers touched, Harper felt electricity that had nothing to do with legal agreements. the same awareness from City Hall that the line between transaction and reality kept blurring, no matter how carefully they tried to maintain it. Her phone buzzed. Email notification. Unknown sender. Subject: the truth about your marriage. Harper's stomach dropped as she opened it. Photos of them at City Hall. Scanned pages of their marriage contract showing payment terms. Bank records documenting the $5,000 transfer. Message: you have 48 hours to publicly admit your fraudulent marriage, or I release everything to Boston Globe, Herald, and WSJ. Signed, a friend. Declan read over her shoulder. His face went rigid. Professional blackmail. His voice was ice. Someone has documents only 4 people should have seen. You, me, Grayson, and Patricia Rodriguez. Patricia's office got hacked, or Cassidy broke in there too. Harper felt cold spreading through her chest. Declan forwarded the email to Grayson immediately, then looked at Harper. We have 48 hours to decide. Confess to fraud or find another option. What other option exists? Make it real. He said it carefully, testing the words. Void the original contract. Remarry for genuine reasons. Turn the blackmail into irrelevant noise because there's nothing fraudulent left to expose. Harper stared. You're suggesting we turn a fake marriage into a real one to avoid admitting the fake one existed. I'm suggesting we decide which truth causes less damage. He held her gaze. If we confess to fraud, I lose credibility with my board. You lose credibility as a journalist. Our families discover they've been lied to. But if we claim the marriage started as a practical arrangement that evolved into genuine feelings, we look unconventional but honest. Harper saw the logic even as her chest tightened. You've thought about this. I've wargamed every exposure scenario since we signed. His voice was quiet. But Harper, if we do this, there's no safety net, no expiration date, no contractual protection from being hurt. Before she could formulate a response, his phone rang. Grayson. Declan answered on speaker. What did you find? Trace the blackmail email IP address. It came from Brookline, your old house, boss, where Vivian lives. The narrator's voice. Sometimes the people who promise to love you forever become the people most determined to destroy you. And sometimes the person you hire to solve a problem becomes the only person you can trust when everything falls apart. 3 days after the confrontation at the gala, Harper sat in a cafe across town where no one would recognize her. Her laptop displayed financial records that made her stomach turn. The email from Marcus Chen, her source, had arrived that morning. Subject: you asked about unusual payments, found something big. A wire transfer of $5 million from Blackwood International to Lancaster Bennett's personal account. Date: 8 weeks ago, 1 week before the city council vote that awarded Bennett Properties a lucrative downtown contract. Memo line: consulting services. Harper cross-referenced against her investigation files. The payment preceded Lancaster's vote against transparency amendments. Amendments that would have exposed his own corruption. This wasn't family dysfunction anymore. This was active collaboration with Declan's enemy. Her phone rang. Lancaster's number. They hadn't spoken in 3 years. She answered. Uncle Lancaster. His voice carried practiced authority. Harper, interesting news about your marriage to Declan Sterling. Quite the social climb. I'm looking at $5 million from Blackwood to your account. Want to explain what consulting services were worth that much? Silence stretched 3 beats. Where did you get my financial records? I'm an investigative journalist. It's what I do. She pulled up more documents, bank statements, corporate filings, emails between your CFO and Blackwood's team. This isn't speculation. You married Sterling. That makes you compromised. No editor will touch this story from you. His tone hardened. Stay out of matters beyond your comprehension, and tell your husband to withdraw his offer for my properties, or things will become very uncomfortable for both of you. The line went dead. Harper sat processing the explicit threat. Lancaster knew about Sterling's acquisition interest. He'd just confirmed the Blackwood connection, and he'd threatened them both. She texted Declan, "Need to talk. Urgent. Lancaster just threatened us." The response came in 30 seconds. "Where are you?" 20 minutes later, Declan appeared wearing jeans and a polo. Apparently, he'd been at a property inspection. He slid into the seat across from her, saw her expression, and his posture shifted. "What happened?" She turned the laptop, explained the transfer, the timeline, the phone call. Declan's face darkened as he absorbed each detail. "I've been trying to acquire those properties for 18 months. Bennett Properties controls 3 contiguous parcels, together large enough to build a flagship hotel directly across from Blackwood's crown jewel. Separately, worthless for my purposes." And Lancaster kept refusing, claiming family legacy and traditional values. His jaw tightened. "Now I understand. Blackwood's been paying him more to keep the properties than I offered to buy them. So Blackwood doesn't need to own the land, just needs to make sure you don't." "Exactly. Your uncle is a proxy blocking my expansion." Declan leaned forward. "Harper, I need everything you have, every piece of evidence." She'd expected this. "There's a problem. He's family. If I hand over my investigation and you destroy him, I'm complicit. It also compromises my credibility, feeding information to my husband about his competitors." The contract includes non-disclosure around business intelligence. You can't publish anyway. His eyes were steady. "But Lancaster threatened you specifically. These aren't empty threats." Harper thought about journalistic ethics versus survival, about lines she'd already crossed. "I'll share what I have on one condition. You tell me everything about those properties. No omissions." They moved to his car. He drove while explaining the downtown development, architectural renderings on the display screen showing a sleek 300-room hotel with ground-floor retail and rooftop restaurant. It would compete directly with Blackwood's flagship, 200 feet away. Declan's smile was grim. "Which is why he can't let me build it." "How long have you been planning this?" 5 years, since before the divorce." His voice flattened. "Vivian knew everything. We discussed it over dinners when we still had those. She helped me think through positioning." The implications settled heavy. "When she started seeing Blackwood, she told him your entire strategy. He's been blocking me using intelligence she provided during our marriage." His hands tightened on the wheel. "I didn't realize until you showed me that Lancaster transfer." Harper's phone buzzed. Email notification. Unknown sender. Subject: "The truth about your marriage." Her stomach dropped. Photos of City Hall. Scanned marriage contract pages. Bank records showing the $5,000 payment. Message: "You have 48 hours to publicly admit your fraudulent marriage, or I release everything to Boston Globe, Herald, and WSJ. Signed, a friend." Declan read over her shoulder as she held up the phone. His face went rigid. Professional blackmail. He pulled into a parking lot, killed the engine. Someone accessed documents only 4 people should have seen. Cassidy. Harper felt ice spreading through her chest. She must have broken into Patricia's office. Declan forwarded the email to Grayson immediately. "We have 48 hours to decide. Confess to fraud or find another option." "What other option exists?" "Make it real." He said it carefully. "Destroy the contract. Actually commit. Turn the blackmail irrelevant because there's nothing fraudulent left to expose." Harper stared. "You're suggesting we turn a fake marriage real to avoid admitting it was fake. If we confess, I lose my board's trust. You lose journalistic credibility. Our families discover the deception." He held her gaze. "But if we claim the marriage started practically and evolved genuinely, we look unconventional but honest." Before she could respond, her phone rang. Nana B. "Hi, Nana." The surgery went perfectly yesterday, honey. Beatrice's voice was stronger than Harper had heard in months. They're moving me to a regular room this afternoon. The doctor said my new valve is working beautifully. Relief flooded through Harper so intensely she felt dizzy. That's incredible. I'm so glad. Me too. Means I'll be around to meet those great-grandchildren. A pause. How's married life? You haven't visited since the wedding. It's been complicated. Good complicated. Harper glanced at Declan. We're figuring things out. Marriage is always complicated. That's how you know it's worth it. Beatrice's tone softened. Bring Declan soon. I want to know the man who convinced you to risk your heart again. After hanging up, Harper processed relief alongside everything collapsing around them. Declan spoke quietly. She made it through. Successfully, which means the original reason I agreed to this just resolved itself. Harper met his eyes. She got what she needed. I could walk away now. You could, his voice was carefully neutral. Take the money, void the contract, go back to your life. I'd handle the blackmail. And your mother? Would die believing I found happiness. He reached across the console, took her hand. But Harper, if you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling, maybe being blackmailed into honesty is what we needed. Both phones buzzed. Grayson. Trace the blackmail, IP. You need to see this. Office. Now. At Sterling headquarters, Grayson waited with his laptop in grim expression. IP address came from Brookline. Your old house, boss, where Vivian lives. The air left the room. Declan went very still. I dug deeper into financials. The LLC paying Cassidy, funded by VSH Capital, Vivian Sterling Holdings. Grayson pulled up documents. She's been buying Sterling stock gradually for 3 years. Individual purchases below reporting thresholds. She now owns 30%. Combined with Blackwood's 21%, they have majority control. Harper felt pieces clicking into sickening place. She's not just dating your rival. She's orchestrating a hostile takeover. And I hired Cassidy on her fabricated references. Declan moved to the window. Trusted my ex-wife had moved on when she was positioning to take everything I built. Why? Harper looked between them. She got half your assets in the divorce. Grayson's expression was grim. Because Declan filed first. Once he had proof of her affair, he initiated separation. Vivian didn't choose to leave. She was forced out. Taking money wasn't enough. She wants to destroy what he values most. The calculated malice of a multi-year revenge plot settled over the room like smoke. Declan turned from the window. Show me everything. Every stock purchase, every payment, every connection. For 2 hours, they examined documentation. Vivian's shell companies purchasing stock in careful increments. The same holding company funding Cassidy's fake identity and comprehensive espionage. Evidence suggesting planning since before the divorce finalized. Every romantic dinner where they discussed his business dreams had been intelligence gathering for future weaponization. Around 7 p.m., Grayson left. Harper and Declan sat as city lights flickered on below. The blackmail came from her. Declan's voice was flat. She wants us to confess or stay silent while she uses it as leverage. Either way, she wins. Unless we don't play her game. Harper pulled up the email again. She's counting on us panicking, turning on each other. What are you thinking? Emergency board meeting. Tomorrow. We expose everything. Her stock manipulation, Cassidy's espionage, Blackwood's illegal tactics. The idea crystallized. And my Lancaster investigation gives you additional ammunition showing their methods. If you hand over that investigation publicly, you can never publish it. I'm choosing, Harper stood, because this stopped being a transaction somewhere along the way. I want to protect you, us, whatever this is becoming. Declan cupped her face. I'm falling in love with you. Maybe it started when you destroyed Vivian at the gala, maybe in the coffee shop. But it's happening, and it terrifies me, and you need to know before we blow up both our lives. Tears pricked Harper's eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. We had rules. I know. You broke them. I'm aware. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. If you want to walk away, I'll help you. I'll handle Vivian. Protect your reputation. Harper thought about safety versus courage, about walls built after Archer, about Declan offering an exit instead of demanding she stay. She kissed him. Not performance, honest desire and terrified hope. When they broke apart, she whispered, I'm staying, I'm fighting, and I'm choosing you, not the contract. You. Then let's end this, together. They spent the night preparing. Grayson compiled Vivian's stock purchases. Harper organized her Lancaster investigation. Declan pulled his Blackwood counterintelligence files. Months of documented money laundering, illegal share purchases, bribery. Around midnight, Declan made a decision. He pulled up legal documents on his computer, typed rapidly, then turned the screen to Harper. Share transfer agreement. I'm giving you 30% of Sterling Hospitality, my personal shares, not company treasury. His voice was steady. It makes you the second largest shareholder. It also makes our marriage impossible to call fraudulent. Nobody gives away 30% of a billion-dollar company for $50,000. Harper stared at the document. Declan, that's worth roughly $500 million at current valuation. I know. He met her eyes. This isn't strategy, it's commitment. If we're making this marriage real, you deserve an equal stake in what we're building. Together. She read the document twice. This makes me my partner in everything. He handed her a pen. If you want it. Harper signed, watched him sign, felt the weight of genuine commitment replace contractual obligation. They responded to Vivian's blackmail email. Thank you for pushing us toward honesty. We'll be making a statement at our emergency board meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. You're welcome to attend. Vivian called immediately. Harper answered on speaker. How brave. What statement do you think will save you from fraud charges? We're telling the truth, Harper said steadily, about how our marriage started as an arrangement and became genuine. I think the board will find that compelling. They'll find it pathetic. Declan leaned toward the phone. The board meeting is 10 a.m. We're discussing your stock manipulation, corporate espionage, and conspiracy with Blackwood. See you there. Silence. Then, you can't prove any of that. Actually, we can. Grayson's been thorough. Declan ended the call. The next morning, Harper stood outside the Sterling Hospitality boardroom, wearing a navy suit and carrying a leather portfolio thick enough to be a weapon. Inside were bank statements, wire transfers, photographs, recordings, everything from Declan's Blackwood investigation and her Lancaster research, compiled into irrefutable proof. Declan squeezed her hand once before they entered. The boardroom fell silent as they walked in. 20 executives sat around the mahogany table. Thornton Blackwood occupied the head chair, Declan's chair, with Vivian beside him. Both smiled like predators who'd already won. Mr. Sterling, Blackwood's voice carried practiced cruelty. How kind of you to attend, though I'm not sure why you brought your wife. Because she's a 30% shareholder as of last night, Declan said calmly, which makes her vote rather important. Grayson, if you would. Grayson pulled up presentations on the wall screens. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past 3 years, someone has been purchasing Sterling stock through shell companies. This is absurd, Vivian interrupted. Declan's trying to deflect from his fraudulent marriage. My marriage started as a practical arrangement, Declan cut her off. Harper and I were honest about that with each other from day one. What we weren't honest about was how quickly it became genuine. That's unconventional, but it's not fraud. Harper stepped forward. What is fraud is using fake identities to conduct corporate espionage. Cassidy Brennan, Declan's executive assistant for 18 months, doesn't exist. Her identity was fabricated by VSH Capital, a holding company owned by Vivian Sterling, funded through the same LLC that's been buying Sterling stock illegally. Murmurs rippled around the table. That's ridiculous, Vivian said, but her voice had lost confidence. We have evidence. Harper dropped the portfolio on the table. Papers spilled across polished mahogany. Bank statements showing VSH Capital's payments to Cassidy. Wire transfers purchasing Sterling shares in increments designed to avoid SEC reporting. Emails between Vivian and Blackwood coordinating their takeover. Furthermore, Harper continued, we have evidence that Blackwood International has been bribing board members, laundering money through 12 shell companies, and conspiring with Lancaster Bennett, who received $5 million to block Sterling's property acquisitions using city council influence. She pulled out specific documents, slid them to individual board members whose faces paled as they recognized their own names. Federal prosecutors have copies of everything, Declan said quietly. The FBI is downstairs waiting to speak with Mr. Blackwood and certain board members about securities fraud and bribery charges. Blackwood's face drained of color. You can't, we can, and we did. Declan's voice was ice. You've spent 10 years trying to destroy me through illegal means. Vivian spent 3 years planning a hostile takeover using intelligence she gathered during our marriage. You both underestimated one critical factor. What's that? Vivian's voice was barely a whisper. That eventually, I'd find someone I could actually trust. He looked at Harper. Someone who chose to fight beside me instead of using me for personal gain. The boardroom doors opened. FBI agents entered with federal prosecutors behind them. 2 hours later, Harper and Declan stood on the building's roof garden while chaos unfolded below. Blackwood and 3 board members had been taken into custody. Vivian's lawyers were already negotiating her surrender. The remaining board had voted unanimous confidence in Declan's leadership. It's over, Harper said quietly. Not quite. Declan pulled a small box from his pocket, dropped to one knee. We got married the first time because we were desperate and practical. I'm asking now because I'm certain and terrified and completely in love with you. Harper Elizabeth Donovan Sterling, will you marry me? For real this time? She pulled him up, kissed him hard. Yes, but only if we destroy that first contract. Already done. Grayson shredded it an hour ago. Then yes, absolutely yes. 6 weeks later, Harper stood in the same coffee shop where she'd first collided with Declan. Different branch, but close enough to feel like destiny completing a circle. Skylar sat across from her, actually smiling. You know, when Dad first brought you home, I thought you were like Mom, just here for the money. I was, kind of. Harper kept her voice honest. But somewhere between the contract and now, it became about more than money. I know, I can see it. Skylar stirred her latte. The way you look at him, the way he looks at you, it's different than with Mom. It's real. Through the window, Harper watched Declan approach. He'd been visiting Roslyn, who'd passed peacefully 2 weeks ago, surrounded by family, knowing her son had found happiness. He entered, spotted them, and his whole face softened in the way it only did now when he saw Harper. Ready? He asked. For what? Our actual wedding is in 2 hours. Riley's been texting that you're going to be late. He grinned. Again? That was one time, Harper protested, standing. Skylar laughed. You were late to your own City Hall wedding because you stopped to fact-check an article. Occupational hazard. They walked out together, Declan, Harper, and Skylar, looking less like a business arrangement and more like the family they'd accidentally become. That afternoon, in a small ceremony at the Harbor Hotel where they'd confronted Vivian, Harper married Declan for the second time. No contract, no timeline, no protection from being hurt. Just 2 people who'd started with a $5,000 transaction and ended up with something neither had planned for: partnership, trust, and the kind of love that survived being built on a foundation of honest lies. Nana B sat in the front row, recovered and radiant, whispering to the woman beside her. I knew that girl just needed the right push. Sometimes the universe answers prayers in the strangest ways. Riley, maid of honor, leaned over to Harper before the ceremony started. So, you married a billionaire for money, fell in love accidentally, took down a criminal conspiracy, and ended up with both the guy and 30% of his company. That's the most Harper Donovan thing I've ever heard. I contain multitudes, Harper said dryly. You contain chaos, Riley hugged her. But I'm happy for you. He's good for you. You're good for him. Declan's vows were simpler this time. I promise to be worth the risk you took on me, every day for the rest of our lives. Harper's response came easy. I promise to keep asking hard questions and calling you out when you need it, and to love you through all the answers we haven't figured out yet. The kiss lasted longer than 3 seconds. Afterward, at the reception, Grayson pulled Declan aside. Lancaster Bennett took a plea deal, cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. He's providing testimony against Blackwood. And Vivian? Her lawyers are still negotiating, but with the evidence Harper provided, she's looking at securities fraud charges minimum. Declan nodded slowly. The company? Stock price is up 18% since the news broke. Turns out investors like it when you clean house and demonstrate actual integrity. Grayson smiled. You've got a good partner, boss, in business and life. I know. Later, Harper found Skylar on the hotel balcony overlooking the harbor. You okay? Harper asked. Yeah, just thinking. Skylar turned. My mom tried to destroy my dad. You helped save him. That's a pretty low bar for stepmother approval, but you cleared it. Harper laughed despite herself. High praise. I mean it, you're good for him. For us. Skylar's voice went quieter. Thanks for not giving up when things got complicated. Thanks for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one. They stood together, watching the sun set over Boston, the city where a coffee shop collision had led to a contract marriage, had led to actual love, had led to them standing here, improbably family. Inside, Declan searched for Harper, found her with his daughter, and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. Not just happiness, something deeper. Home. The narrator's voice drifted through the evening. Sometimes the best things in life start as terrible ideas. A $5,000 contract. A marriage of convenience. A business transaction between two people too damaged to risk anything real. But sometimes, rarely, wonderfully, against all odds, terrible ideas become the best decisions you ever made. Not because the plan worked out, but because you were brave enough to let the plan fall apart and build something better in the ruins. 6 months after the wedding, Harper published a story about corporate espionage and hostile takeovers. It won her second Pulitzer. She dedicated it to Declan, who taught her that sometimes the most important stories weren't the ones you wrote, they were the ones you lived. And every morning, Declan still made her coffee exactly how she liked it. Not because a contract required it, but because love, it turned out, was built from small gestures repeated daily until they became the foundation of something that could survive anything, even the truth.